Okay, so let's talk about your speech for Forbes because you think about the kinds of things covered in that speech, right? It's all about communicating, right? And how tell me the title of your talk again.
Media presence, your most important business skill, your most
Right,
vital business skill, your most important business skill,
right.
because I truly believe it is. Here it is. Here's my premise.
Well, okay, first define what you mean by media presence.
Well, media presence is social media presence. It could be presence in front of any medium, and
Mhm.
that could mean meeting somebody on the street. That's a medium as well. So
Okay.
I'm using it in probably the most loose definition possible, because we are all in the media today, on the media, in the media, on top of the media. We are all involved somehow, and we are all being assessed one way or another. And you put so many years into developing your credentials and going to school and learning this skill and that skill and this trade and that trade. And yet, when it comes to getting in the door, that will do it on paper. But getting through the door and getting to stay behind the door is a whole different story. And I differentiate between the bread, the steak, different. That's so funny.
Different analogy. Yeah.
But it's food.
Right.
I differentiate between the steak and the sizzle. And the steak is what gets us to the door, but it's the sizzle that's going to keep us through the door. And I think that's a very important perspective for people to understand, because nobody that I ever studied and learned from talked about it in this way. We
Well,
are
I
so
think to add to that,
mediagenic. We have to be mediagenic today.
well, I mean, we do talk about how you're hired for your knowledge and fired for your behaviors. So,
No,
is media presence in that behavioral aspect, do you think?
yes, absolutely, absolutely. You don't need to be tremendously media present to get the stake. I mean, to get your college degree, to get your master's degree, if it's an MBA or whatever it is, to get your PhD. You don't have to know a whole lot about media. It's usually credentials on paper. And sometimes we are intermixing, especially in the courses that we train people for, we are intermixing the videos with the other requirements. But that's a little infinitesimal amount in
Yeah.
comparison to getting those credentials on paper. Before I worked at Forbes, I was asked to, when I was invited to work at Forbes, they wanted to look at my college transcript, my graduate school transcripts, all of these transcripts. And that was me on paper, but they had no idea about me in real life and how I would be a fit in an organization or create havoc in an organization. And sometimes some of the most brilliant people just cannot communicate well enough to stay in their positions.
Yeah, it's definitely a skill that, we try to teach a little bit in these communications-based courses, but I really think that there's a lot more that can be added at all levels. And do you think that they should be doing more once you're in the door? Because I think a lot of people are hired for their knowledge and fired for their behaviors, as I said. So what should leaders do to ensure that this is being trained,
It's
throughout?
so funny that you should ask that, because as a matter of fact, I, I wrote this book called, no, seriously, one
I
up.
gotta find books of mine to hold up once in a
I know
while.
you really do. You got this thing from me.
Hidden somewhere on the bookshelf behind. But you have to look. It's like, where's Waldo?
Well, I didn't intend to talk about this today, but this is why I wrote this book, One Up Strategies Business Schools Don't Teach.
Ah,
Because I was so frustrated when I was teaching in a business school in New York, where we were not teaching the kinds of communication skills that would get people not to be fired for their behavior. And this book is filled with articles that I published in CEO magazines and elsewhere. And I just compiled all of the things that I was frustrated with that we were not teaching in the business schools. And business schools go through much rigor to get accredited, and all their courses need to be accredited. And the people who are all the way up there making these decisions have no idea that these are skills where behavioral actions will slaughter them if they are not knowledgeable about how to do what they have to do. A CEO, as a matter of fact, told me with one of the articles I had written, he had just been fired, and he said, boy, I wish I had had this article
yeah, yeah.
before, before I ended up plummeting in my career.
Well, having worked as MBA program chair, and as dean, short stint as dean, and different things that I've done, I have seen some of the behind the scenes things of what it takes to change some of the schooling that people get. And some of it makes me realize that it's not as easy as you think, because you have, students aren't going to want to add extra classes. You want to get out in a certain amount of time. You're, like you said, the accreditation process. So a lot of it is adding to the classes, and that you can't just drop stuff into classes. It has to go through all these different reviews and different things. So it's very difficult until they revise courses to do, and that doesn't happen every year. It doesn't happen all the time, depending on the school. So,
and that's too bad, because that means that academia is not keeping up with the trends.
It's very expensive, and then you got to pay for students more. There things that sound good. Sometimes there's a price to, and so I think it's a combination of we need it in schools, but we also need it in the workplace. And I can't tell you how many workplaces I've worked in where they go, "Here's your desk." I mean, that was your training,